In this video, let's talk about what it's like to be a D1 athlete and if you actually know what the rigors are and if it's actually going to be the right choice for you. So if you're new here, I'm Dan Blewett. I was a D1 and pro baseball player, and I've advised a lot of young athletes over the years about what the right fit for them is in college. And this is important. And what I don't like young people chasing is a label. You don't want to go play D1 and be miserable because you hate the school, you hate the town, and you don't like your coaches, but you desperately needed to be known as a D1 athlete. That's not important in the long run. It might seem really important now, and other people in your life, unfortunately, might make you think it's really important, but it's not. Ultimately, very few of you are going to turn pro, and in many cases, you might not play a sport where like the pro track really makes a lot of sense for you. There might not be a lucrative pro league, or it's not really in the cards. And so we really have to ask ourselves, why do we want to go D1? And are the lesser levels like D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, could they be just as good in giving you the athletic experience that you want while really filling most of those buckets? So here's some of the things you don't know about D1 sports probably. Number one, they can be extremely ruthless. You might get an offer to go play at a D1, and you might show up in the fall or in the spring, depending on whatever your sport is, with lots more players than they can actually keep on the roster. This happens a ton in my sport, baseball, where they're just stacking, the roster with 50 players in the fall in some instances and cutting 20 of them or 25 of them. So all these kids say, oh, I'm a D1 baseball player, I'm going to this school, and then they show up and they've got to fight for a spot. And then when they don't get one, coach says, bye-bye. Thanks for playing. You need to transfer. You're not going to be a part of this team. Or in many cases, players do make the team and then they have a mediocre first season. And then it's bye-bye. We didn't really see much out of you in the 6 innings that you got this season or the couple games that you played in. And we don't think you're going to ever play again because we've got a great freshman class coming in behind you. So we think you should transfer. There are many, many stories like this. And if you start asking around, you'll find them. So understand that if you're not really confident where they've given you some scholarship money, where they have some investment in you that they don't want to lose, or it's going to be tied up in you, or you're very confident that you can play at this level, and it's not really a super stretch, then you need to understand that it can be very competitive and you may never see the field. And then you have to ask yourself, am I going to still be happy in this school if I'm stuck there? Am I still going to be happy in this town? Do they have a major that's relevant? I went to a school that didn't have a major that really fit me that well. My life has worked out. I studied philosophy. It turned out to be super right for me. And my life as an entrepreneur and author, it's in a sort of roundabout way been the perfect major. But at the time, if my school offered exercise science, which it didn't, or nutrition, which it didn't, I probably would have majored in one of those too, because I became really interested in both those in my freshman year. But school-wise, my D1 was not a good fit. And it just happened to work out, but for many of you, it won't. If you really want to be a lawyer one day, or you really want to be a biologist, or you really want to work in accounting or nutrition or exercise science, if your school doesn't offer those majors and you're just going there because that was the best D1 offer you got, and now you're never going to see the field and you're unhappy, that's a really bad situation where you're not getting the academic experience that you want or the athletic experience that you want. So understand you really need to like the town and the school in addition to having a viable chance of playing. And a lot of times this means compromising on the school. So say I'm a really highly touted high school prospect and I can play at some big SEC or ACC schools, but there's going to be tons of players just like me. Or I can play at a mid-tier D1 where it's way more likely that I can crack the lineup and actually stick at that school. It's probably a safer choice in many cases to choose the lower tier school where it gives me a little bit of cushion because I'm really, really good. So that's some of the calculus that you need to think about is this the absolute, maybe, University of Southern California offered me, but no scholarship money, whereas there's some smaller D1s that offered me some money. Do I really want to go to the higher school where I really risk maybe never seeing the field? Or do I want to go somewhere where I'm more wanted and it's more in my ability range to play? So don't sell yourself short, but make a really informed choice, because this happens to way more people than you realize, especially at D1s. Second really important topic is student life is very different for a student athlete than a regular student. And you have to ask yourself, do you want to get up at 6 a.m. for pool workouts or for yoga or for your running, your conditioning? and then go to class from 8 to 1 and have very little say in the time that you have to schedule your classes, because you have to fit them all in before your practice, which is usually in the afternoon from like 2 to 5. And then you're going to have probably mandatory study hall if you're a freshman or sophomore. So your whole day is going to be dictated from like 6 a.m. until probably 8 p.m. pretty much every day. And your friends are pretty much going to be your teammates and others in the athletic department. And it's going to be very hard for you to meet other non-athlete people and develop deep relationships. It's not impossible, but it's very hard. And you kind of have friends built in, and it can be a very narrow sort of existence where the only people that you know are other athletes. And that's not the typical student experience in college. College is a time to really bloom and learn all these different things. You're living on your own for the first time, and you likely want to have the full college experience, and you absolutely will not as a D1 athlete. At D3, at D2, there's much more student-athlete life balance where you can do lots more things because the schedule is less rigorous. That's a little less true for D2. It's definitely true for D3 where they practice less and play fewer games. And then in JUCOs and AIAs, it varies widely. But at D1 and D2 especially, the game schedules are very rigorous. The practice schedules are very rigorous. In D1, it's like you get 1 day off a week, which is mandated. But you're practicing and playing pretty much every day the entire school year, except for that 1 weekly off day. That's a lot. It's not the typical student experience. And you might say, hey, that's what I want. I'm a full athlete, like full blown. I want to do that. Sports, 24/7. That's fine. And I totally support that. But in case you didn't know, that's why we're having this talk here. It's a very different experience. So if you want to see how good you can be and you want to grind it out and work really hard and have all these workouts and practice a ton and have all these games, that's your prerogative, but that is the life of a D1 athlete. And there's a reason that a decent percentage of athletes, when they get to their school, they're like, this isn't for me. I kind of want to just do college. I want to be able to go to concerts. I want to be able to go to spring break. I want to be able to study abroad. I want to be able to study whatever major that I want. And you can't necessarily do that if you're a D1 athlete. You will absolutely not have a spring break. Well, it depends on the sport. If you have your spring sport, it's possible. Well, if you don't have a spring sport, it's possible. If you play a spring sport, it's completely impossible. You will not be able to study abroad. Like all these different things are going to be closed to you as a D1 athlete because your schedule is just too packed with your sport. And there's certain majors that you will not be able to take because they're going to too directly conflict with your practice and game schedule. Many of the engineering and like biological sciences, pre-med, that kind of stuff, they are really difficult to do as a D1 athlete because so many of their required lab classes happen in the afternoon because a lot of the higher level classes are afternoon and a lot of the lower level freshman, sophomore classes are typically in the mornings. So you can't miss practice 3 days a week to go to your biology labs from 2 to 4:30. It's just not going to be allowed by your sport in most instances. And they'll tell you this up front. They're like, you can't major in these majors because they're going to conflict too much with being on the team. So that's something you could potentially give up by being a D1 athlete. So you have to consider that. All these things said, D1, you'll have amazing experience, you'll have amazing coaches, you'll have amazing facilities. And if you're a really competitive athlete, you'll get to see how good you can be and have some really memorable times driving and flying around the country and doing all these cool things. But remember, there is a trade-off, and that's your schedule, that's your requirements as far as like school and like where you have to be. There's a lot of constraints on your schedule, and you will not have the same student experience that many other people have. Your social life will be vastly different, much more regulated. Your school life will be vastly different, much more constrained, and it's just different. So understand it's not good or bad. If you want to play D1 sports, I did it. I loved it. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I just want you to have an eyes open question about this, because when you go on your visit, they're not going to necessarily not sell you on D1 athlete is great, but there is a side that most people don't know about. It's an incredibly rigorous time. It can be an amazing time, but it's not for everyone. All right. So thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Share with a friend, subscribe to the channel below, and I'll see you here in the next video.